At 2 p.m., January 26, 1945, the snow-covered clearing near Holtzwihr, France looked quiet. Too quiet. Second Lieutenant Audie Leon Murphy crouched in a shallow foxhole, staring across 1,000 yards of open ground toward a dark treeline. The air temperature sat at 14 degrees Fahrenheit. His breath came out in short white bursts. His fingers were stiff inside his gloves. Then the trees moved. 6 German Panzer tanks emerged slowly from the forest, steel hulls cutting through snow and brush like predators stepping into open ground. Behind them came infantry. Hundreds of them. White winter camouflage, rifles low, moving with confidence. Murphy didn't need binoculars to understand what he was seeing. He'd seen this pattern before. German armor always led. Infantry followed close behind. American positions broke when tanks got close enough. Not because the men were weak. Because the math was impossible. Murphy was 19 years old. He had been in continuous combat for 18 months. North Africa, Sicily, Italy, France. Over 240 confirmed enemy kills already behind him. Now he commanded what was left of Company B 15th Infantry Regiment. Exactly 40 men. Yesterday, Company B had taken 102 casualties. Every officer except Murphy was dead or wounded. What stood behind him made the situation even worse. If this position collapsed, the Germans wouldn't just overrun his company. Behind Murphy sat division headquarters, artillery positions, supply dumps. The entire 3rd Infantry Division was exposed. The Germans weren't attacking a platoon. They were trying to break the American line. The stakes went beyond this clearing. This was the Colmar Pocket, the last German foothold on French soil. If the Germans broke through here, they could hit Patton's Third Army from the rear. They could delay the war. They could change the campaign. Murphy counted again. 6 tanks. Roughly 250 German infantry. 40 Americans in shallow foxholes dug into frozen ground they couldn't penetrate. No reinforcements in sight. Orders were simple. Hold the position. Murphy swallowed. The math said they should be dead in 15 minutes. Murphy had never trusted math. Company B didn't look like a company anymore. It looked like what survived a massacre. The night before, the men had tried to dig foxholes into the frozen earth. Picks snapped, shovels bounced uselessly off ground harder than concrete. By morning, most positions were nothing more than shallow scrapes in the snow. 14 degrees. Wind cutting through wool and canvas. Hands numb, feet burning, then going dead. Murphy moved from position to position, checking his men. They were exhausted, hollow-eyed, and quiet, not afraid. Just tired. 40 soldiers left from a full-strength rifle company of 187 men. Everyone knew what that meant. Murphy positioned 2 M10 tank destroyers along the narrow dirt road leading into the clearing. They weren't ideal, but they were all he had. The M10s were lightly armored, open-topped, vulnerable to German guns. If the Panzers were Panthers, the M10s would die fast. Murphy studied the terrain again. The clearing was a natural killing zone, 400 yards wide, 600 deep. No cover. If the Germans crossed it under fire, they would die. But his men were too few to hold it alone. At 1:58 p.m., Murphy picked up the field phone and called battalion headquarters. He requested the artillery fire mission he had registered earlier. 8 105mm howitzers were standing by. Coordinates already calculated. The line crackled. Fire mission available. Murphy watched the German line forming in the tree line. Tanks in front. Infantry following too close. Too confident. At 2 p.m., the German artillery opened up. Shells ripped through the clearing. One struck a tree beside a machine gun nest. 2 Americans were killed instantly. Another shell hit the leftmost M10. Direct hit. The tank destroyer erupted into flames. The crew bailed out, running for the woods. Murphy watched the fire climb higher. Black smoke twisted into the sky. The Germans kept coming. Murphy made his decision. Company B couldn't hold this position forward. Not against tanks. Not against that many men. At 2:02 p.m., he gave the order. Fall back to the woods. Defensive positions, 150 yards. The clearing would become a killing zone. But someone had to stay forward. Someone had to hold the phone. Someone had to direct the artillery. Murphy stayed. He crouched alone in his shallow command post. No cover. Just frozen dirt and snow. The field telephone sat on an ammunition crate beside him. One thin wire ran back to battalion. If that wire was cut, the artillery stopped. If the artillery stopped, the Germans broke through. Murphy picked up the phone. Fire mission, he said calmly. Execute. The first artillery shells landed 600 yards out, right where Murphy had marked the German assembly area. Snow and earth exploded upward. Murphy counted silently. 18 seconds from gun to impact. 8 guns firing in unison. He adjusted the fire. Drop 100, right 50. The German tanks kept moving. They advanced slowly, methodically, their turrets searching through smoke and snow. The infantry followed close behind, too close. Textbook German doctrine. Infantry protected the tanks. Tanks provided firepower. Together, they crushed defenses. At 600 yards, Murphy could see the markings now. Panzer IVs. At least one Panther. His men were gone from the clearing, pulled back into the tree line. From the German perspective, the American position looked abandoned. That was exactly what Murphy wanted. Then another shell hit. The second M10 took a direct hit. Flames erupted. The crew bailed out, sprinting for cover. Now both tank destroyers were burning. Murphy's command post was collapsing around him. Snow churned into mud, shrapnel snapped overhead, rifle fire cracked through the smoke. The Germans were at 400 yards. Murphy glanced left. The nearest burning M10 sat barely 40 yards away. Black smoke poured from its engine compartment. Flames licked around the turret ring. Any moment now, the ammunition inside could cook off and tear the vehicle apart. Then Murphy noticed something. The .50 caliber machine gun was still mounted on the turret. The ammunition boxes were still attached. 5 boxes. More than 500 rounds. Murphy didn't hesitate. He grabbed the field phone, kept the handset pressed to his ear, and crawled toward the burning tank destroyer. The heat hit him before he reached it. Even at 10 yards, it felt like opening an oven door. The metal hull popped and groaned. At 2:10 p.m., Murphy climbed onto the rear deck. The turret was hot enough to scorch through his gloves. The machine gun mount was intact. The belt was loaded. Murphy swung the gun toward the clearing. The Germans were at 350 yards now. Through the smoke, he could see infantry bunching up, preparing for the final push. Murphy positioned himself behind the gun. Below him, the M10 burned harder. Above him, German tanks traversed their guns. Behind him, 40 American soldiers waited in the trees, trusting him to keep the enemy back. Murphy pressed the butterfly trigger. The .50 caliber roared to life. The sound cut through everything: artillery, engines, shouting. Heavy rounds tore into the advancing infantry. Men fell. Others dove into the snow. But they kept coming. Murphy fired in short, disciplined bursts. Left to right. Then back again. He kept the field phone wedged between his shoulder and ear, shouting corrections between bursts. Fire for effect. The artillery kept falling. The Germans reached a drainage ditch at 300 yards. They paused there, trying to reorganize. Murphy didn't let them. He adjusted his aim and fired again. The ditch turned red. Murphy checked the ammo counter. 400 rounds left. The Germans had expected the clearing to be empty. Instead, they had found one man on a burning tank, refusing to move. And the battle was just beginning. The Germans adjusted fast. They always did. At 300 yards, infantry began spreading out, using shallow folds in the ground for cover. Rifle fire cracked toward the burning tank destroyer. Tracers sliced through smoke. Murphy stayed exposed. The heat from the M10 soaked through his boots. The metal deck beneath his feet burned hotter with every minute. Black smoke wrapped around him, sometimes hiding him completely, sometimes peeling away and leaving him naked in the open. That smoke saved his life. When it drifted left, German gunners fired where they thought he was. When it drifted right, Murphy reappeared somewhere else. He kept firing. Short bursts. 3 seconds. 20 rounds at a time. He swept the advancing infantry, forcing them down again and again. At 2:13 p.m., the Germans tried to flank him from the right. A squad emerged from a shallow depression, 75 yards. Too close. Murphy traversed the gun and fired. The heavy rounds hit like hammers. The squad collapsed instantly. No one got back up. The phone crackled in his ear. Murphy adjusted artillery again. Drop 50. Fire for effect. Shells fell behind the infantry now, trapping them between indirect fire and the .50 caliber. The Germans were pinned. At 2:18 p.m., Murphy felt a sharp odor in his right leg. A tank shell had impacted nearby. Shrapnel tore through his boot and buried itself in his calf. Blood soaked into his sock. Murphy didn't look down. He kept firing. The tanks were closer now, 200 yards. He could see commanders in open hatches, pointing, shouting. A panzer fired. The shell screamed past Murphy and detonated in the woods behind him. The concussion rattled his teeth. Murphy picked up the phone. "Fire on my coordinates," he said. There was hesitation on the line. "Confirm danger close." Murphy didn't hesitate. "Confirm. Fire on my position." The artillery shifted. Shells landed barely 100 yards in front of him. German infantry broke and ran. Some died where they stood. Others crawled back into the snow, dragging wounded men behind them. Murphy checked the ammunition counter. 280 rounds remaining. He had been firing for 8 minutes. At 2:21 p.m., another German push came. This one was desperate. A larger group, maybe 30 men, rose together and rushed forward. Murphy fired longer bursts now. 5 seconds. 6. The .50 caliber hammered without mercy. Men fell in rows. The charge collapsed. The tanks halted again. Murphy could feel his hands burning. The spade grips were hot enough to blister skin through gloves that were already burned through. His legs trembled, not from fear, but from cold, pain, and holding the firing position too long. He locked his knees and stayed upright. At 2:26 p.m., Murphy reloaded for the first time. 12 seconds. 12 seconds where he wasn't firing. The Germans tried to use it. Another wave surged forward. Murphy slammed the bolt home and opened fire again. The wave disintegrated. At this point, the clearing was covered in bodies. White uniforms stained dark. Motionless shapes scattered across the snow. The Germans had expected a quick breakthrough. Instead, they were bleeding to death in open ground. Murphy had been firing for 14 minutes. And the Germans still hadn't reached him. At 2:32 p.m., the Germans changed tactics. The tanks began advancing together. 3 Panzer IVs moved abreast, steel hulls grinding forward through snow and churned earth. Their commanders were buttoned up now, hatches closed, turrets steady. They had stopped underestimating the man on the burning tank. Range, 150 yards. Close enough that Murphy could see ice and mud frozen to their armor. Behind them, what remained of the infantry followed hesitantly, broken, scattered, moving because officers were screaming at them to move. Murphy checked the ammo counter. 180 rounds. He had been firing for over 20 minutes. The M10 beneath him was becoming unstable. Small explosions popped inside the hull as stored ammunition cooked off. The metal deck vibrated under his boots. Flames curled higher around the turret base. The heat was unbearable now. Murphy's uniform was smoking. The paint on the machine gun barrel blistered and peeled away. At 2:34 p.m., a German soldier appeared out of nowhere on Murphy's right. Range, 10 yards. The man carried a Panzerfaust. One shot from that weapon would turn the M10 into scrap, and Murphy with it. Murphy reacted without thinking. He depressed the .50 caliber as far as it would go and fired a 1-second burst. The German vanished. The Panzerfaust dropped into the snow, unexploded. Murphy's hands screamed in pain. The spade grips were burning his palms. His gloves were gone, burned through hours ago. Skin blistered. He kept firing. At 2:36 p.m., the ammo counter hit 0. Murphy reloaded. 10 seconds. The Germans saw it. They charged. Dozens of them, 40. maybe more, rushed forward at once, screaming, slipping in the snow, firing wildly. Murphy finished the reload and opened fire immediately. This time, he didn't conserve ammunition. Long bursts. Sweeping arcs. The .50 caliber cut through the charge like a scythe. Men fell on top of men. The charge collapsed less than halfway across the clearing. At 2:39 p.m., something broke. The German infantry stopped advancing. They stayed down. Officers tried to force them up. No one moved. Murphy saw it happen. The moment when momentum dies. The tanks noticed it too. Without infantry support, advancing alone meant exposing their sides and rear to American anti-tank fire. The panzers slowed, then stopped. Murphy checked the ammo counter again. 55 rounds. The machine gun was on the edge of failure. The barrel glowed dull red at the muzzle. Smoke rose from the receiver. The weapon was screaming for mercy. Murphy ignored it. At 2:43 p.m., the Germans made one final attempt. Everything that could still move stood up and charged. Over 100 men. No formation. No coordination. Just desperation. Murphy loaded his final belt. 105 rounds. He opened fire and never stopped. The range closed. 150 yards. 125. 100. Men fell everywhere. The snow turned dark. Murphy traversed left to right, then back again, firing into the densest clusters. At 2:47 p.m., the German tanks began reversing. All six. Backing away. The infantry attack collapsed completely. Murphy fired until the gun clicked empty. 2:49 p.m. 0 rounds left. The .50 caliber was finished. Murphy climbed down from the burning tank destroyer. The instant his boots hit the ground, the M10 detonated. The explosion lifted the turret into the air and tore the hull apart. If Murphy had stayed 10 seconds longer, he would have been vaporized. He limped toward the tree line, blood running down his leg, hands burned, face black with smoke. Behind him, the clearing was silent. The Germans were gone. One man had held them off for 40 minutes. Murphy had barely reached the tree line when American soldiers rushed toward him. They had watched everything. From the moment he climbed onto the burning tank destroyer, to the moment it exploded behind him. Someone grabbed his arm. "Sir, you need a medic." Murphy shook his head. "Get ready," he said, "they might come again." They didn't. The Germans had had enough. At 2:55 p.m., Murphy organized what was left of Company B. Despite the blood soaking his trouser leg, despite the burns on his hands, despite 40 minutes of standing in open fire, he ordered a counterattack. 40 Americans moved forward across the clearing that had been a killing zone minutes earlier. They met almost no resistance. German bodies lay scattered across 400 yards of frozen ground, dead, wounded, or playing dead. Abandoned weapons littered the snow. Helmets, rifles, white camouflage soaked dark. The 6 Panzer tanks were gone. They had reversed out of the fight and withdrawn to their lines. By 3:20 p.m., Company B had regained all lost ground and established new defensive positions 200 yards forward of their original line. The German attack was finished. Murphy finally allowed a medic to look at his leg. Shrapnel fragments were embedded deep in the calf. The medic wanted to evacuate him. Murphy refused. "If they counterattack again," he said, "my men need me here." The battalion commander arrived shortly after. He looked at the clearing. At the destroyed M10. At the bodies. Then at Murphy. "You held this with 40 men?" Murphy nodded. "Actually," he said, "with 1 machine gun." The numbers came in over the next hour. German casualties were estimated at over 120 killed or wounded. Murphy alone accounted for at least 50 confirmed kills. Likely more. Company B losses for the day? 2 killed. 7 wounded. All before Murphy climbed onto the tank destroyer. Once he began firing, American casualties stopped. Division intelligence officers arrived the next morning. Artillery observers confirmed Murphy's fire missions. Multiple witnesses corroborated the timeline. Every account matched. 1 man. 1.50 caliber machine gun. 40 minutes of continuous fire. The German counterattack had failed completely. And with it, the last real chance to break the American line in the Colmar pocket. Strategic analysts would later confirm the truth. If the Germans had broken through at Holzwihr, division headquarters would have been overrun. Artillery positions captured. The American advance into Germany delayed. Possibly by weeks. Murphy's stand prevented all of it. Not with numbers. With position. Fire discipline. And refusal to move. The clearing went quiet that night. The Germans never tried again. The paperwork moved faster than anyone expected. Within 48 hours, reports from infantry officers, artillery observers, and division intelligence all told the same story. No contradictions. No exaggeration. Just numbers. 6 German tanks. Roughly 250 infantry. 1 lieutenant. 1 machine gun. 40 minutes. On January 28, 1945, General Alexander Patch personally recommended Audie Murphy for the Medal of Honor. By then, Murphy was already the most decorated soldier in the 3rd Infantry Division. The medal would make him the most decorated American soldier of World War II. Murphy didn't celebrate. His leg wound became infected days later, forcing evacuation to a rear hospital. He protested. He wanted to stay with Company B. The Army said no. Some men were too valuable to lose twice. Murphy returned to duty weeks later, but never to frontline combat. On June 2, 1945, he received the Medal of Honor in France. He was 20 years old. The citation praised courage, leadership, and valor under fire. It didn't mention the smell of burning metal, or the way his hands blistered around the spade grips, or the moment he realized he might not survive the next 10 seconds. After the war, Murphy went home. America didn't know what to do with him. Hollywood did. Life magazine put him on the cover. America's most decorated soldier. Audie Murphy became a movie star. He played cowboys, soldiers, heroes. He even played himself into Hell and Back, a film about his own war. It became Universal Studios' highest-grossing movie for 20 years. But the war never left him. Murphy slept with a loaded pistol under his pillow. He suffered from nightmares, insomnia, and depression. He became addicted to sleeping pills. Years before PTSD had a name, Murphy spoke openly about it. He told America that courage didn't end when the shooting stopped. That some battles followed soldiers home. On May 28, 1971, Audie Murphy died in a plane crash. He was 45 years old. He was buried at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors. His grave is now the second most visited at Arlington. Only President Kennedy's draws more visitors. The battlefield at Holzwihr is farmland today. The tank destroyer is gone. The machine gun was scrapped. The snow melted long ago. What remains is the lesson that even in industrial war, with divisions, tanks, and artillery, one person still matters. Not because they are fearless, but because they stay when leaving would be easier. Audie Murphy never called himself a hero. He said the real heroes were the ones who didn't come home. But on one frozen afternoon in January 1945, when the math said defeat was inevitable, one man changed the equation.